Welcome to Bit Chats, where we chat with senior IT leaders about the business of IT. This video cast was brought to you by York Solutions. Thanks for joining us today. We're here with Karen Fedyszyn at Cooper's Hawk in Burr Ridge. We're going to chat with Karen today about technology, and more specifically, what she's learned in her career to prepare her for her role as CTO at Cooper's Hawk. So Karen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we're just going to jump right into it.
Okay.
So at what point in your life did you know that you were passionate about technology? Do you have a moment that you're like, this is something pretty cool?
Yeah, actually, it's really interesting. I kind of resisted going into the field of technology. I'd been on computers since I was like 13 years old. My dad really wanted me to get a degree in IT, and I was like, no, that's not cool. It's not sexy. And I was going a little bit more towards ergonomics. Which is really kind of the use of tools as opposed to designing the actual tools themselves. And I did an internship for IBM between my junior and senior year of college, and I was hooked. And in fact, they offered me a job 2 months into it, and then I've never looked back.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So you started in technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as CTO, I have to imagine you have to make lots of decisions that are based around the business now. So at what point did you realize in your career that if you were going to climb the corporate ladder to the pinnacle position that you're at today, that you'll have to shift from making not just technology decisions, but business decisions?
Yeah. I think the importance of business vernacular and business decisions in technology really came to the forefront for me in software development, right? Trying to translate what somebody wanted with how to actually deliver it. And so often those conversations are very disconnected because there's a business conversation happening, there's a technology conversation happening. It's almost like you actually have to have dual language capabilities to translate and be able to make it meaningful to both parties. And for me, that was really the pinnacle. I spent probably 6 years doing website creation and design in the early 2000s, and it was really core to the essence of what we were doing, that you had to fundamentally understand exactly what you wanted to do from a business perspective. And then, for me, I'm very data driven. So understanding the data and the analytics, and are you delivering on the hypothesis that you thought you were going to do, right? Maybe it's getting more wine club members. Are you actually getting those results? Going back, looking at the business information and recycling it back into the technology requirements.
I love what you said about dual languages there, because we've seen a shift in technology in the market, down to people in their jobs where you used to be able to walk in, and if you were a developer, you just develop, right? You can literally sit in the corner and put headphones on and develop, and that just doesn't cut it anymore.
Right.
You have to be able to talk across the aisle, whether you're moving to agile or you're just wanting to drive yourself to a technology-driven organization to figure it out. And that's a hard thing to do for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So now that you're at Cooper's Hawk, what excites you the most about the job, especially being a company growing as fast as Cooper's Hawk's growing right now?
Yeah, we grew 30% last year.
That's awesome.
It's on fire to some extent.
Yeah.
I would say the thing that excites me the most is the fact that we're going from this entrepreneurial company to this mid-sized corporation, and I've had experience across kind of every size of corporation, and being able to take things that were so necessary just to keep the wheels on the bus, so to speak, in the early days, and taking those and now starting to look at the feasibility for, is this still fit for purpose? Is it breaking? And how are you going to continue to move at the same rate and make major change outs for systems, for data, for infrastructure without impacting the journey at all? And that's a lot of fun.
Do you feel like it's a constant rebalancing act of prioritization? How are you dealing with it, right? For a small-sized business, I use infrastructure loosely,
sure.
Right? And we need to grow and scale to here, but there's a million little projects, a million patches we need to do. So balancing, I have to patch this now to keep up with the business growth versus I have to make that huge change, which might put us a step back, but allow us to take 6 steps forward in the future.
Yeah.
How do you balance that internally?
I think for me, I kind of separate them into 2 buckets. like percentage wise. I know I need to probably reserve about 35% of what we're doing right now just for infrastructure and just to build up kind of the plumbing, if you will, to make sure that we're as resilient as we need to be, that we have redundancy, that things are not breaking, because when I first came in, a lot of things are breaking. And so that's one piece. And then that remaining 65% is all about leading forward with new technologies, looking at bigger landscapes. We're putting in, a data lake and doing a lot more with analytics and driving that in a way that we've never done before. So kind of keeping a foot in both camps, but being very methodical about how much time is spent, and then making sure that my team is also aligned that that's how they need to spend their time. And also the fact that they can completely raise their hand if, things are getting out of whack, or if that doesn't make sense, and then we can kind of reshuffle things.
Right. So at our Think IT meetings, which you've been to several times,
Mm-hmm.
For those that don't know, Karen was our first inductee to the Think IT Chicago Hall of Fame at our BID Awards recently.
So such an honor.
Thank you for being a wonderful member, by the way. But a lot of those meetings, this is what comes up all the time. We have the business and we have IT.
Yeah.
And there's this battle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this fight to be, have a seat at the table.
Right.
And I find this fascinating for a couple of reasons. One, I question sometimes if people know what the table is.
Mm-hmm.
The table to me isn't, I have a seat and now I just get to make decisions. It's influence, it's politicking, it's all these things, communication that wrap into it. But what can you give me an example when you actually had to push back on the business? When they were like, hey, Karen, I need you to do this. Maybe they didn't understand why, or it couldn't be done, or you were like, that's just a bad idea.
Yeah.
What was that situation?
Yeah, the places where I see that struggle the most are areas that are inherent to technology. You get into a budgeting conversation and there's conversations about, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it, or do you really have to replace that technology? It's not, it may be end of life, but there's not really a problem to it. And I find that those are some of the areas where we really need to push back and saying, these are, from a security perspective, from a cyber defense perspective, just from a break fix, you have to make decisions to keep technologies current. And there needs to be the ability within technology to make those decisions instead of having to kind of explain it to everybody else exactly how it works, right? I'm not going to be able to give somebody a master's in IS in the course of a conversation explaining to them how the infrastructure runs. But what I do is I put it into business vernacular, right? So it's all about risk. So if we don't do these things, then if we do have an outage, then this is going to be what's happened. And we've equated our outages into how much money do we make per hour or per day in a restaurant on average. And when we have those outages, now it's impacting that. And because we have a wine club and our members are so important to everything we do, there's 320,000 of them so far, to make sure that we never have a negative impact to our members, or we never do anything to lose our members, is really important to that. So putting it into business language and explaining how that actually will manifest itself if we ignore that type of technology, that's where I push back on the business. And we still have reasonable conversations. It doesn't mean that I win the conversation every single time, but at least everybody's informed. We're kind of documenting. We go, okay, this is a risk that we've said that we're going to accept, and that we're going to mitigate at a future date.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. So you mentioned your team several times. So getting into your 12-month to 36 to 60-month roadmap here, what are some of the major challenges and initiatives that you guys have, and what are you doing to overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, I think because Cooper's Hawk has been growing so fast, we have grabbed services off the internet for this little function, right? For shipping, or for payroll, or for managing timesheets. In fact, right now in HR alone, we have 14 different systems or online services that we use, but yet they're not connected. So we were grabbing them really fast, moving as fast as we could, and now we've created a problem for ourselves where we're having data duplication, we're having errors, those types of things. So, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. What was the question before?
What are some of the major challenges, and how are you preparing your team to overcome them?
Okay, so because that was, I'm going to back up just a tiny bit. Because we have been grabbing technologies and putting them into play in an entrepreneurial sense, now we have to change our mindset. That's not going to be the go-to way that we make our decisions anymore. So that's a really big challenge for the team. Some people in my team have been there for 8 years. That is literally how we have done things. But they also see the pain and see the challenges that have been created by that. So now starting to look at the collection of services and software and capabilities and saying, okay, we probably need maybe a little bit more leading type of technology solution here, and we're going to bring it all together. And so a lot of them are really excited that we're getting to the point where we're going to actually be bringing in bigger systems and bigger technologies and really changing their jobs. You know, we did some automation this past year, and people were so excited to not be like doing mundane tasks anymore, that now, you know, alerts are coming in and things like that. So it's been great.
So was that one of the things that attracted you to Cooper's Hawk, with some of these challenges, and, you know, taking manual testing and moving to automated and kind of taking that next leap? If not, what was kind of the main things that attracted you to this job?
Sure. The founder, Tim McHenry, was definitely part of the attraction for me, as well as the chief marketing officer, Tom Konigsberg. So in my interviews and my conversations with them, and even in the way that the job description itself was presented, you could tell that there was some change that was needed to happen, that was going to be underway in association with technology. We're not going to just keep the lights on anymore. We're going to start leading and driving the business with technical solutions. We're going to start putting it more front and center on core capabilities and changing the way that we do business. Even though for 13 years, we have been an incredibly successful company without that. The challenges are things are just not scaling. So in those conversations, I could just tell that they had this amazing vision for what they wanted to accomplish, and they were really looking for a partner to help them accomplish that. And that's what I love to do.
Someone told me one time that we are always underqualified for the job that we have because you've never done it before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about going from a CIO to CIO at another place. Well, it's a different set of challenges, right? But all of those experiences help prepare you for that challenge. So going back to your interviewing, and yes, it's fun to get, you know, excited. A lot of the things that are happening at Cooper's Hawk, the 30% growth that you guys are having, and opening restaurants, and you know, your member base. But what was it in your previous experiences, if you could just talk for a couple minutes, that really prepared you for this job, that you felt comfortable accepting the opportunity at the end of the day and say, I know I can take on this challenge, and I know I can be successful?
Yeah,
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think there's always a small portion of you that's never prepared or never 100% confident that you can do something, particularly with an unknown, right? I only know so much. The interview process only tells me so much. Once I actually start and get behind the scenes, I'm going to find out a lot more. So there's always a little bit of that apprehension. But what prepared me to even have the level of confidence to go into these types of roles was accepting bigger and greater challenges throughout my career. At one point, I was offered the opportunity to build data centers around the world. And I am not an infrastructure person. I had never built data centers. I was pretty sure my security pass didn't actually get me into the data center. Seriously. And here they were saying, we want you to build these, and you know, you're going to have billions of dollars in a budget to do this because this is absolutely imperative. And I sat with the CIO at HSBC at the time, and I said, I don't have a background. And he goes, I'm not looking for you to be an expert anymore. I'm looking for you to be a leader. And I'm confident in your leadership skills, that you can now harness the energy of the experts around you. And I've always taken that into everything that I've done, that I'm no longer really a subject matter expert, except maybe in strategy, and that it's really about making sure I have the right people in the right positions with the right talent and the right training so that I can rely upon them to execute the work that needs to happen. And so I go into everything with that. Instead of trying to solve the problems myself, I'm not going to be able to do that.
What do you think has been effective for you, with us as an IT consulting firm, specializing in talent? That's always an interesting thing. How have you gone about identifying top talent to partner with you on this journey as well as, past endeavors?
Sure. I look for people who are very different. And I say different in the way of different than me, maybe different than somebody else on the team. I kind of look at it as like a puzzle. And of course, always looking for the core technology skills, whether it's, developing in Java or, Salesforce administrator or something that's very, very specific. But then also looking at the person's personality and maybe some other things that they bring to the table, their ability to collaborate, or maybe they are great at brainstorming. They are excellent at public speaking, or different types of things where it really starts to balance out the team a little bit and everybody kind of plays a slightly different role, even though they're all collaborating on the technology. So I've done that a lot with talent, and I also rely a lot on my peers and my network to really help me find talent, the potential talent, and then through the interview process, trying to make sure I understand enough about what the person's going to be like when they start. It's been pretty reliable.
Can you share, and I'll do it as well, can you share with us one of your favorite interview questions?
I got to get that one out of my mind.
While you're thinking of one, so I'll tell you one of mine.
Yeah.
And I stole. I have no creative thoughts in my body. I steal everything and then try to make it my own.
Uh-huh.
But I'll give credit. So this really came from my wife when she was interviewing for a job. Her CEO had asked her this question, and I thought it was brilliant. And I looked at it in almost every interview I do. But I'll ask someone, give me an example of something that you're really good at, but you hate doing.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I really don't care about the answer. I want to see, can they think on their feet, one, right? And also, if you say, like, I'm really good at cleaning, but I hate cleaning, like, then that's lacking some creativity and some self-reflection. There probably aren't things that are out there. So I just find it an interesting question that most people don't ever prepare for. Maybe if millions of people watch this, everyone will know now when they interview with people. We'll see if that happens.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to ask is, particularly kind of in the software areas, application development areas, I like to ask if you've ever created code that was riddled with bugs. And like, at what point in the process did you find out that you had the bugs? And kind of how did you handle the situation? How did you handle the situation with the end users? How did you handle the situation with the project managers? What did you do? Was the project on time? That type of thing. And it's really interesting because I think there's kind of two ways to look at it. People who are fearful of being honest about whether or not you've ever created buggy code are not for me. Because, well, to be honest, we've all done it, right? And a lot of times it's the business requirements were not clear, or there was a disconnect in communication in how something was perceived to be going to be designed versus the way that it was designed from a technological perspective. And then you get into these UAT scenarios where it's like, oh, wow, it's totally different than we thought. And users are marking it off as bugs, and sometimes they're marking them off as bugs and they're not actually bugs. They're purposeful design. So it's always interesting to see how somebody answers that question, because it's not really a question about interrogating whether or not you have good coding skills. It's interrogating whether or not you've ever participated in the full life cycle of a project and how you deal with all of those different complexities and interactions and all the different people that you're going to kind of meet through the course of a project. And I find those answers to be much more interesting about how a person will actually behave in the job once they're in the seat.
Love that. So on that question as well.
Okay, I'll steal yours.
Okay, steal mine.
I really like that one.
Actually,
it's making me think.
Don't say cleaning. So
Years ago, it would have been changing a diaper.
you're changing a diaper. Yeah, I'm in that now.
I know you
Lots
are.
of diapers. So with technology and it changes. So technology is accelerating the rate of change. We all know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of organizations, it's always about what's the newest technology nowadays. Whether it's we're moving to React or Vue or whatever, pick it out of the sky. How do you balance the rate of change in technology? Because as soon as you implement something, there's going to be something new in the market, right? So they can do it better, faster. And so how do you balance that with we got to stay the course on this, and let's not worry about the shiny new object over there. Well, and give it the benefit out. Maybe it is a little bit better. How do you balance that rate of change in technology?
Yeah, I think you have to, one, keep your focus and try not to be too distracted by the shiny objects.
Right.
That's super important. Years ago, we used to look at kind of the technology plan as almost like this 5-year plan. It was kind of 3 years of somewhat pretty baked stuff and 2 years of aspirational placeholders. I don't even do 5 years. Like, what a waste of time, because half the things that I'd be talking about in year 4 and 5 may not even exist anymore. The vendors may not exist. The concepts may have completely changed. AI, data, artificial, everything has kind of evolved past where you thought it was going to go. So from a strategic plan perspective, I focus on 2 years, and I have a third that's aspirational. And the first year is pretty baked. Like, we know what we're going to do. We've already secured our funding. We're good to go. We might have 10-15% of kind of swap out depending on an acquisition or something that's a significant change that's going to come in. And then the second year is really kind of aspirational. I've been having conversations with my business partners. I understand where they're thinking about going, what they're contemplating doing, and we'll spend some time doing demos with vendors that we've never heard of. I reserve a certain amount of time to do that each week, where I just pick a different technology and learn about it. And so that helps to kind of keep current and flush things out. I also really encourage my team to do that as well. Go take webinars, look at these products that you've never worked with before, understand what's out there in the marketplace, but also don't let it be a total distraction, because that's part of the innovation portion of our role, which is a smaller percentage than kind of the core competencies that we're focused on today.
I think the ability of a good leader to either admit when they were wrong or admit when they gathered more information and it maybe have changed their viewpoint is always impressive. So can you give me an example, whether it's 6 months or a year ago, something relative that you were pretty set that this was the right answer that maybe has flipped?
Sure. It probably takes me back a little bit further, but it has to do with change management and putting in big, major systems and the importance of the human integration to it. I made a mistake at one point of maybe not prioritizing the rate of change and the ability to not only just train people, but for them to adapt to that changing environment. And probably didn't leave enough time in a project to do that. And then now change management is kind of, I learned from that mistake, right? I think you're supposed to go through things and learn. And now change management is one of the most important things that you do, because you can have a great project and you can do things right all day long. But if you don't plan for the change, it will fail every single time.
Thank you so much, not only for having us here at Cooper's Talk,
Yeah.
but for good time. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Cheers.